volunteered to do 3 days of observation, 2 at the Maricopa County Recorder's Tabulation Center, Sunday, October 25th, and Sunday, November 1. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Been waiting all day to speak with you folks. On the 25th of October, I observed no ballot tabulation happening. There was simply adjudication. Approximately 12% of the vote of 100,000 votes a day needed to be operating with doing their job and being very open and transparent. When I approached the gentleman who was running the Dominion machinery and computer software, and I don't have his last name, I have his first name, I'm trying to get his last name, because I had indicated that I was concerned that using a computer such as that a 14-year-old could hack into the system, chuckled and kind of just shrugged off my concerns. And I told him that I had just watched a month earlier a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, where Tom Cruise crawled through the ventilation system and went into a room very much like what the equipment is in, and he was able to get in and get the information and get out. And at that point, he really laughed. He did point to all the wiring that was hanging from the ceiling in baskets, and so that there was nothing plugged to the internet or into walls. Everything was coming from the master sealed up room. And I said, well, in the end, a 14-year-old could get in and hack it. At least that's the world I live in, because I watched the 1969 original Mission Impossible, so a lot's happened since then. The following Sunday, I actually left about 2:30 in the afternoon. I was scheduled to work until 4:30, but I felt that I had better things to do given what I had seen. There was no tabulation going on. So I came back there bright and early for morning shift on 11/1, and I showed up, and the operators were there. Same gentleman that was running the operation. I'll leave him nameless. He's named in my affidavit. And I was able to say good morning to him and said, yeah, I guess nothing's happening with the 14-year-old yet, and kind of made light of it. I was a Republican observer on the 25th, but on 11/1, Greg, who testified earlier before your panel, who's very, very knowledgeable about software and internet technology, he and I spoke for a few minutes before the process started, and I was able to explain to him how I engaged Bruce the week before, and felt really just wasn't able to get the information from Bruce or acknowledge what was going on with the process of counting the votes or collecting the votes, because I didn't have the knowledge. Well, it turns out that Greg had more than enough knowledge for this gentleman. That I call him the master of ceremonies for Dominion, because he's a contracted third party by the county. He's actually paid by Dominion, and Dominion is paid by the county. So about 20, 30 minutes, I guess, into the operation, one of the smaller, older machines had a problem where it got locked up and it stopped working, stopped counting ballots. And this gentleman, master of ceremonies, came over with his laptop and plugged right into that machine, and he began to immediately do whatever he was doing with the files. And this is when Greg and I sprung to our feet, and Greg took the lead and went over his shoulder and looked exactly what he was doing and asking him questions all along. And he was able to actually get hard data of what was being done with regards to when a file gets too full, it stops, and then it has to make subsets and all that. The questions that I had on Sunday previous is how does he back it up? But I could never get to that point on Sunday the 25th. But on Sunday the 1st, with Greg's expert questioning and knowledge and understanding of what was going on, he took him through the entire process to where how the votes were how the votes were handled, and how they were, when it got to be too big a file, they had to make subfolders. And then the question came up, my whole thing is, what happens if this building burns down? What happens to the information? So with that, along with that question hanging from the previous week, and Greg saying that, yeah, he took him right to the point at what point do you make a copy, a data, and how do you make the copy? And from what I recall, and my understanding is that he makes a complete copy of the entire voter file. And at the end of the shift, he leaves the building with it. I say he takes it home. According to Greg, heard him say he takes it upstairs. I talked to Greg one other time, not to compare our testimony, but to say what I remember. He took it out of the building and he took it home, as far as I'm concerned. I did not hear him say that he gave it to somebody else or anything. It was all in this gentleman's possession the entire time. because he brought it back with him the next morning. That the hard drive came back and forth in and out of the building unsupervised with no oversight whatsoever. Okay. There's some other problems with adjudication, but I'll leave that for another time. I want to say that on my day of the 3rd, when I showed up to at 4701 South 7th Street at 6:30 in the morning, I was greeted by the poll supervisor, who immediately noticed I was a Republican observer and told me that there would be no bathroom facilities for me to use at this beautiful brand new multi-million-dollar high school that was built, academy, that there would be no bathroom facilities. And if I had to use the restroom, I'd have to go off-site. To which I answered, that's fine, I have some containers here, I'll be able to, kiddingly, I'll be able to find a quiet corner and use it to relieve myself, whatever. So about 10 o'clock in the morning, and after a very slow trickle of people coming in, because I counted votes until I was ejected at 2 p.m., and I'll tell you the reason for that, but there was less than 200 people by 2 p.m. And so at noon, when I got up to use the restroom at 10, I came back and there were 2 voting machines there. And with the trickle of people, there must have, at that point, there was only at 10 o'clock, maybe 50 or 60 people that had voted. And I was curious as to why there were 2 of these machines and 2 ballot boxes. So I paused as I was returning to my seat, because a woman was coming to put her vote in the machines, and I was going to determine which machine is she putting in. Is she being directed to put it in one machine or the other? And at that point, the poll supervisor told me to get back to my seat or I would be removed from the property, because I'm not following orders and following her direction, specifically that I was to sit in my chair the entire time, which is far away from being able to see anything. So I went back and I sat compliantly, and I was kibitzing with the Democratic observer, talking about life in general. And she kept coming over to me and says, if you speak anymore, you're going to be ejected. So I literally, at 12 noon, before I zipped my mouth and didn't say another word, I asked her, so at 7 o'clock, what will happen when it's time to break down the machines and take the votes, seal the votes in a container and take them to the counting tabulation center? And she said, well, you'll have to leave the building. I said, but that doesn't feel right to me, because I'm supposed to observe. That's an important part of the process that I should be allowed to observe. She says, you will be removed by my security out front. There will be nobody in this room except the poll workers themselves, period. So I said, well, that just doesn't sound right. So I just sipped it. I put on my bandana. For the next 2 hours, I sat there in complete silence, counted about another 50 people. So I was up to, at 2 o'clock, I was about 220 people. And at 2 o'clock, I'm sitting there, I'm realizing I'm not going to be able to be here at 7 o'clock, and there's really not much else I can see what's going on. So my time here, I could better serve someplace else. So I noticed that a woman came in with her sealed ballot, mail-in ballot, a Hispanic woman, could not speak a word of English. I speak Spanish. And I heard her say, I have this ballot, but I want a new ballot. I want to vote differently. So she immediately, this poll supervisor handed her kit gloves, right on it, concierge services, because she was the only person in the building at that time. They take her over, give her a new ballot, and they walk her around these 40 or so ballot stations, and they park themselves right to where I could see them intentionally. The the poll supervisor with her back to me, and the translator with a face shield, gesticulating for about 90 seconds. They kept talking to the lady, and the poll supervisor kept looking around the 3-sided partition, looking around. I'm thinking, I know it's a crime if I take a picture. I know that. I know it's a misdemeanor. But no one will believe me if I don't capture what's actually going on. So I took my phone out surreptitiously, I put it up, and I took a snapshot, got one, took another snapshot instantly after, because the guy kept pointing, gesticulating. I didn't take a movie, I just took 2 stills, and immediately the poll supervisor wheeled around on her heels and was in front of me in 5 seconds, says, please leave now. If you don't leave now, I'll have security drag you out. You're out, you're gone. And I believe that was her plan all along. She didn't want me there to be watching what was going on at 7 o'clock. She told me it wasn't my place to be there. So I left. I drove to the Republican National headquarters on 24th Street. I got counsel from an attorney there who told me absolutely not. Here's the IRS statute. It says that you are supposed to be there for the breakdown of the ballot, of taking out the data cards. You're supposed to watch the ballots be locked into the box for transportation and then follow them to the place. So I got in my car, I drove straight back down there. By the time I got there, it was about 4:45. And here's this woman out front with her bodyguard. There's no cars in the parking lot. There's nobody voting. It's 4:45. Polls close in 2 hours and 15 minutes. I had just left there 2 hours earlier. So I tried to get her attention, and the security gentleman told me that I must leave now or he'll have me arrested. So I left, telling her, saying, please look up ARS statute. I was allowed to be there. You wrongfully terminated me. I never would have taken the picture had I had the right to stay till 7 o'clock. That's when I lost my right to be there at 7, I decided I would take the next action, which is to get something, proof that if I'm not going to be here at 7, I better do something, because this is a crime. I understand you cannot interfere with people voting. So as a result, after that, I just kind of went home with my tail between my legs, really frustrated that I wasn't armed with the legal statute to have me stand my ground at the polling place. And the fact that this woman from 6:30 in the morning telling me I couldn't relieve myself, I'd have to leave the property, and to stay in my chair, don't walk around. And I understand I had the ability to stand by those ballot machines and just watch people drop them, and not talk to anybody, but just simply watch them drop the ballots in and find out at the end of the night, were Republican votes in one box and Democrat votes in the other? I don't know. So that was that day. So then I got a call saying they needed a little more help at the tabulation center, and I got a shift to go Thursday evening at 2:30 till 10. I only lasted about an hour because I asked questions about the process, and I was considered rude by the person who was running the situation for asking those questions. And here's my concern for that, is that there was no tabulation going on, no counting, but they were transferring overseas votes from printed PDFs onto digital screens, creating votes, which would then, I understood, to be later to be printed out and then counted. But my problem with that was that I noticed there was a handwritten serial number on each one of them, and I can't touch it, so I had to wait till they moved it, and then I had to wait. It takes time to figure out about those. And I went to another station, and it was only 100 difference to another station, like 3 stations down, and the serial numbers were only off by 100. I thought, well, that doesn't seem right, because if there's 180 stacks, that should be, the number should be at least 200 or 300 difference. So when I asked the woman, it was my final questions, I said, where are these ballots portals? Where's this being printed? And she tried to make it seem like it was a federal thing. And then she admitted that, no, this is a county recorder thing. And it's in a secure room somewhere, a secure portal room. I said, so it's run by the county? Yes. Who's supervising that? Is anybody giving oversight? No. So ballots are being created, they're printing off of a ballot, and then they're putting a serial number on it, and then they're giving it to people to upload it into the machine. Fair enough, but there's no supervision when it comes out of the printer. What are you printing from? None of that. And then I asked my final question was, is there any way I can find out how many votes were put in for the precinct down at the polling place 4701 South 7th Street? And she sent one of her witnesses away, and in 3 minutes she came back and said 524 votes were turned in. And I said, no, I don't think that's correct, because between 2 o'clock in the afternoon, again, this is, my opinion, but there were not 300 people that came in from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 7 o'clock, because I was there at 4:30 and there was zero traffic coming in or out. I was there for about half an hour till I got booted. That's all my story, and I'd like to say, if I can indulge you legislators, one favor. I just want to say that I'm completely humbled and grateful to be sitting before you to be able to give this testimony. And I would just like to say to Mayor Giuliani that he has my undying gratitude for his exquisite and epic display of courage and citizenship. And I would very much like to shake his hand if I could. Can I shake your hand?
Thank you, sir. So, members, ladies and gentlemen, we have 4 more witnesses, and we have gone 3 hours over the period of time that the hotel has very, very graciously afforded us. We're going to have to end this by 7:30. So in order to give Mayor Giuliani the opportunity to have a closing statement, for each member here to have a closing statement, there are 4 individuals that are here that we would like to make sure that we have their testimony in the form of an affidavit. We've got the names. I'll get those to Ms. Ellis, but we're going to have to wrap this up. So Mr. Giuliani, would you like to have a closing statement?
Sure, and I would like Jenna Ellis to conclude it. I'll be very brief. I'll just review the facts.
Thank you, sir.
We had a long and very disturbing day. I didn't expect things to be this bad, frankly. It's a much worse situation than I realized before I came here. The fraud is much more blatant, more wide open. The whole situation with the Dominion machine is really a national security problem. If you think about it carefully, it's not just Arizona's problem, it's Michigan's problem and Pennsylvania's problem, but it's also the United States problem, that our votes are going overseas, whether they're connected to China or Venezuela or not. These machines are wide open. China, Russia know how to take information from us from machines far more sophisticated than these extremely poorly constructed devices. And I remember 4 years ago, we were really upset about the bogus charge of Russian collusion involving some emails that all turned out to be true. They weren't properly obtained, but the information in them turned out to be true, which people failed to realize. And the charge of Russian collusion turned out to be false. And now when we look back on it, the person who colluded with Russia was Hillary Clinton, and the person who got money from Russia was Joe Biden. Now we're facing not a false charge of collusion, we're facing multiple charges in multiple states of a unheard of in our history invasion of our sacred right to vote. We had a long session today, difficult session, and it began and ended pretty much the same way. It began with the colonel pointing out that the Dominion machines that you were using in Maricopa might as well just been wide open computers that anybody could hack into, anybody had access to. And just in case it was hard to do it, there's plenty of testimony that despite the fact that they said there were no connections to the internet, your counting rooms and voting rooms were filled with internet connections. And just in case, you might remember that chart on the wall that I can't understand with all those arrows and things like that. That's the traffic that was going on from your voting machines and your calculating machines to the rest of the world. So there's scientific proof that they were communicating hundreds of thousands of times, if not more, which is totally inconsistent with the idea that a voting machine is, as you said, Mr. Chairman, it should be a self-contained unit. The votes go in that box, and they remain in that box. And no one can have access to it except the officials who are going to count the vote. And then it should remain there so we can audit it. It shouldn't be able to be changed the way it was here. We showed you how they changed it in those two elections in Michigan. They just switched the vote after it was over. Well, if they did it in Michigan, you've got to find out if they did it in Arizona. You can't certify this vote and not know just the extent to which Dominion changed the vote. That's their expertise. That's what they do. The reason we can't prove to you the full extent of it is because your state government will not make available the machines. You make these machines available to Phil, I bet he can get you an answer in 3-4 days. Right, Phil? Am I going too ambitious? 3 or 4 days. So I challenge the governor who doesn't want to meet with me, maybe meet with Phil and turn over the machines. And let Phil see, are we telling the truth when we say they stole the vote from President Trump? But we don't even have to rely on that. I asked, you might note, all your witnesses, our witnesses, your witnesses, I asked them to do the best they could to estimate the number of ballots that went through, mail ballots that went through without any observation by a Republican. Because that's completely illegal. That's the central part of their conspiracy, because they did that in every other state. They did it in Pennsylvania. They did it in Michigan. They did it in Nevada. They did it in Wisconsin. And they did it in Georgia. It can't be an accident that they did the same thing. And they did it in the big cities where they could manipulate the vote better, not in the whole state. Same plan, same pattern, same thing. So in Pennsylvania, it turns out to be about 827,000 votes that were entered into the box without a single Republican around. And, they could have been cast all by Mickey Mouse. We have no idea. Those votes are completely null and void. Under the law of Wisconsin, votes like that are completely null and void. And I just did a quick count. I counted up 769,903 that these witnesses estimated went through without their being able to observe, as the law requires, and I believe due process requires. And I think we'll be able to show that to the Supreme Court. It was 35,000 for Ann Orth. It was Elizabeth Harris, 22,903, and then another 130,000. Then about 120,000 for Janice Bryant. Leslie Minkus, approximately 100,000, the 55 tables. Judith, I'm forgetting Judith's last name here, 162,000, and Kathleen Alvey, 200,000. And you can go back and check that. My arithmetic may be a little off, but it's somewhere between 750 and 800,000 votes. I'm sorry, that's a lot of votes. That goes beyond just determining the election between Trump and Biden. That's over. That's 10 million, that's 10,000 votes. This is having stolen an election from the people of Arizona. And they're going to say, well, if you cancel out the 769,000 votes, you're denying them the right to vote. No, you're not. You're reaffirming the right to vote of your other 4 million people who cast an honest ballot. We don't even know if these people exist. And I'm sure some of them don't even exist. So we're going to deprive living human beings of their franchise in order to preserve the franchise of people who maybe don't exist, maybe are illegal, maybe are felons, or maybe voted 10 times. There's no way to know. They completely flaunted the law and put us in a position where we have to conclude that these ballots are null and void. So I know it's really tough. Sometimes I know what you're facing because we face it every day. We face horrible threats, ridiculous things said about us. I have now come to the conclusion that I'm proud that I'm called those names by people like that. It makes me very proud of myself, and I think my mother and father, who both are dead, but taught me to be a patriotic American, are proud of me also. So I don't really give a damn what they say. And I know you're like that too. I know you're all like that too, or you wouldn't be here. But you got a lot of colleagues that are not. And they're not necessarily bad people. They're people who want to make a living. They're people who don't want their families harassed. They're people that want the opportunity to just, get by every day and do something good. You got to convince them that this thing that we have, liberty and freedom and the right to vote and freedom of religion and freedom of speech, it's under attack all the time. From the beginning of our republic until now, it's under attack. Sometimes foreign enemies, sometimes domestic enemies, sometimes combination of both. And it's impossible to tell who gets called upon to make sacrifices. You think of all the young men and women we've lost overseas. They were called upon to make a sacrifice, and other young men and women weren't. Well, right now, you're being called upon to make the sacrifice. The members of this legislature. The Constitution of the United States put the finger on you. Our founding fathers put the finger on you. You're our salvation. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution puts the finger of responsibility in preserving our right to vote on the legislature of Arizona. Not your governor, thank goodness. Not your Secretary of State, even more thank goodness. But it puts it on you. And for those who are afraid, Look, I've dealt with human beings that I had to convince to testify against the Sicilian Mafia. I had to get them to testify against the 5 families. Had to get them to testify against Joe Bonanno in Tucson, Arizona.
Yes, sir, you
where
did.
the nuns actually threw me out of the hospital because he built the hospital. And I've sat there with men crying, and worse than that, because they felt they were going to die doing it. But they found the courage to do it. And after they did it, they felt so much better about themselves. What I would say to my colleagues is, I mean this in the generic sense, just be a man or a woman, not a sniveling coward. You'll feel so much better. You'll feel so much better about yourself. There's nothing that elevates you more than an act of courage. And there's nothing that demeans you more than an act of cowardice. See if you can convince them of that. We need it so badly. And I can't say enough about all of you, about your courage, Mark in particular, Sonny, and all of you. Leo, Nancy, I got to see all the rest there. Brett, oh, you're covering your name. What are you? Come on, be like Jan Hancock. Be the first one to sign. Kelly, David, and Sylvia. You're also all very, very good questioners, very intelligent, and very, very properly motivated. And I'm counting on you to find me a whole bunch of others in the legislature just like you, or turn them into you. And would you just sum up on the law so they understand? Maybe can preach it to the others.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's been difficult to follow that, but I will also likewise encourage this legislature that the facts have been explained today. You have witnesses, you have the evidence, you had the claim, but now you have the proof. And with that, the law is on your side. Committee is on your side, and it's in your hands. And so when you have attorneys, you have other fellow members, you have anyone else in the fake news media, whoever it is, telling you that you cannot act or that you should sit idly by and simply allow the certification to go through, that is absolutely false. And when our founding fathers, who themselves had an incredible act of moral courage that lasted for years, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, they all unanimously signed it, pledging their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And that has been the pledge of every American who has understood that they provided the mandate in the Constitution to protect and preserve liberty and freedom and the greatest country on the face of the earth that we experience as the United States of America today. And the reason that they provided the mechanism in Article 2, Section 1.2, is to give you, the state legislatures here in Arizona, and we would call on Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Michigan, and Nevada, and possibly others, to recognize that you are the sole guardian to combat a corrupted election. And there was a purpose and a design for that. Because when the founders understood the separation of powers, when they understood that the human heart is corrupt, and they understood that there would always be attacks upon our liberty and freedom, they wanted to make sure that the will of the people in the selection of our president, our chief magistrate, would be vested in a body that is separate from that corruption and could look honestly at what happened and be fact finders. You have been fact finders here today. And the mayor and I have both practiced criminal law, me a little bit less than he has, just a few years behind him. And we have a standard in criminal law called beyond reasonable doubt. And every jury that I've spoken to, as both a prosecutor and then a criminal defense attorney, we have the definition of reasonable doubt. And it's a doubt that's not vague, imaginary, or speculative, but a doubt that causes a reasonable person to hesitate to act in matters of importance themselves. Why is your governor and your secretary of state not hesitating to act? There is